I thought I would do a video on the alien ship that I flew. Now, a lot of people ask me a lot of questions about this ship and they get disturbed at the fact that I have a lot of very detailed answers of how this ship operated. Now, if you look at recent examples of things such as my history pioneering artificial intelligence and the fact that I can show people how I can create not artificial but true self-awareness in computer code in just a few lines of code. I've got videos of me going through some things that I can do with code that shock people. And I pioneered a lot of artificial intelligence from like 15, 20 years ago. I've also made my armored light suit technology that people thought I was full of shit with that too. Last year I posted this shit publicly to the U.S. government in public, and 4 months later the Russians have built a variant of the exact same stuff that I'm talking about, and then a few months after that they put functional variants of it on two warships, and then now they're making armored personal shields, just like my suit. And I've got me showing this. I built this prototype years ago. Everyone's shitting themselves over this because it renders all conventional warfare just completely useless. They're taking this shit seriously. Maybe you should too. I'm not full of shit of all this stuff. So I thought I'd do a video on deep space travel technology and how a specific alien ship operated. I thought I was thinking about writing all this down and just going through every little detail, but I'm really fatigued, and I thought I'm just gonna wing it. I'll just put it all together, and I might make a better video of this later. But for now, I'll just wing it, and I'll just talk through some things off the top of my head. So, this ship, it's like a bird with closed wings. It wasn't one of these circular type of alien ships that you often hear about. This was completely different than everything else. From what I saw, there were all kinds of ships, but most of them were like the circular kind, and they seemed to have the same kind of technology. But whatever this ship that I flew, it was very different, and it seemed to be some kind of different technology. It may have actually been the same technology, but it seemed to be different. So there's a lot I could say here, and I'm gonna have to redo this video in a more detailed version. So I'm just winging it here. So much I could say. So here's a picture of what the inside of the ship looked like. Now there are two screens on the left and right that monitored information inside and outside the ship. One of them covered what's inside. One of them covered what's outside. Now they were held there from restraining arms that hang from up high on the roof. There was like a place where they're connected to the roof and shit, and there was some little cables and stuff attached to it as well. But you could actually you could move these around, and you could actually swap their positions. Moving them around wasn't such a big deal. It was a little bit annoying because the whole thing was so cramped. It was a one-man ship. It was a small one-man ship, and everything was really cramped. And you could move them around it was a little bit annoying to be able to do that if you wanted to do that. And you could even swap them around left, right, and left. But I did that once, and it was a fucking pain in the ass. It was like trying to work on a poorly designed car. It was just because it's so cramped, and it was really hard. It took me like half an hour just to move them, just to swap them around. But you could do that. There was a lot of customization you could do. So the information on these two screens, it had like default information, generic information, but you could actually, with the semicircle paneling that you can see there, you could actually, through that, you could actually change the information that's on there. You could remove things and add other things and just customize a lot of shit. Not that there was any real reason to, apart from just playing around. The default stuff was all you ever really needed. So when it comes to stuff inside your ship, I never needed to use that. But I understood that in certain situations there could be reasons, because there are certain parties that you would come across who had a very bad reputation, and you want to be cautious. So for example, the armored light technology that I said, as just an example, you could emit light or sound through a video message with someone on your screen, and it could be done in such a way that you don't consciously see it. And it could knock you out. It could build up and effectively knock you out, or it could manipulate you in some way or anything, and you wouldn't see it happening. But because of the screen that's monitoring inside your ship, it monitors the air and temperature and everything, but most of what it did monitored all kinds of things, but most of what it monitored you, your body, your heartbeat, what's going on with your blood flow, all kinds of stuff, so that it was designed to protect you from any potential attack. But I never saw that ever happen, but I understood the reason behind it, and that this potentially does happen, and it was to the point where they put this kind of thing into the ship. The other one for monitoring stuff outside the ship, that was very useful. Mostly just for when you're in close range to other things, to know some details, like distance, direction, and some things that are just curious to know. It could, all kinds of information. And you didn't really need to use any of these screens, but the one that monitored outside the ship was very useful when you're in close proximity to certain things. And there's also, when it comes to trying to locate certain things, like on a planet or something. So this ship was actually a hybrid ship. It wasn't just meant for space travel or planetary travel. It was built to be a long distance, one-man hybrid ship for VRPs. And as I said before, it was very cramped. It wasn't very large, it was very cramped. And you had like a big full body-sized reclining seat that you kind of laid into. It was very inclined backwards. Like driving a Formula One car, basically. So the semicircle panel, I've got so much I could say here. The semicircle panel, you could actually fly the whole ship automated. You didn't need to manually do anything, but it was a lot easier if you did certain things manually, like short distance trips and landing and maneuvering and stuff. You really want to do that with the what do you call it, the steering wheel, for lack of a better word. And so you could do all kinds of stuff. You could you do like an autopilot, set waypoints, speed. You could actually put different what would you call them? Maybe scripts, for lack of a better word, for things to do during that direction to a waypoint or whatever, or how to interact with certain things on the way, on top of default precautionary measures. There's all kinds of stuff you could do. I wouldn't want to go through it all. What else can I say? So there were a couple of small little screens on there. On the semicircle panel. They weren't really that important. One of them was probably more important than others, but mainly it was the two screens on the left and right that actually meant anything. Now, at the front of the ship, you see there's the bigger view screen. It went up and it got wider, and then it curved into like a semicircle up the top. You can't see in that image there. The view screen was very big, on a really strange shape, because it went so high up. You wouldn't really need to really see that high up, but in certain situations, when you're in close proximity to a lot of things, it did come in handy. What else could I say? So much I could say. So steering wheel. So the way you move the steering wheel, it operated on various axes. So if you push the whole steering wheel forward, you would go forward, depending on the acceleration of how much you push forward. And if you pulled it back, it would slow you down or eventually make you stop. You could also, I won't go for that. That's another story. But so if you rotated it like a steering wheel, it would rotate the ship. It would spin the ship left and right. You could bend the steering wheel itself up and down on an axis, and that would tilt the ship forward and back, and you could actually move the whole thing left and right to bank left and right. You can use all kinds of axes to this steering wheel, and it was quite easy to use. It wasn't that hard. It come really easy to use. What else to say? Oh yeah, the orange thing in the front there, you can see on this image. That's a stasis chamber. That's for when you do long distance space travel. That's what I got to mention. The whole purpose of this video, I wanted to describe how long distance space travel works. So this is a stasis chamber you would go into. It looked like it didn't actually belong to the ship. Like it was custom put in there in the only empty space that it could fit. It didn't. It seemed out of place, and it seemed that they would maybe put one of these in to match the occupant for a long trip journey, because you want something that you can even fit in, and you want some customization to make sure that it would work for customized for you. But that was where the stasis chamber that you would go in, and it would fill up with a liquid gel kind of substance, and it would put you unconscious, and it would basically freeze you for the journey, and then it would unfreeze you at the end. And if you did this over and over, it would build up a degenerative effect, and it'd fuck you up over time. So there's only messengers, certain profession that you would do as a messenger. These are the people who would suffer this. Everyone else, they wouldn't be traveling that much to be able to have this, it wouldn't be a huge problem for them. And it's something that only affects messengers. So understand I'm skipping so much, and I'm just going through a few things here. Before I go to the deep space, there's weapons. Okay, so when I first had access to this ship, there were I don't know if the weapons were disabled or there were no weapons on it. I reckon they're probably just disabled. I wasn't told about them. But later on, they were. And these were like two, at the front lower sides of the ship, there were these two prongs that would come out of the sides of the ship, and they would charge up. And they were like as far as I could tell, they might have been some kind of electrical charge or something. And they would basically send two bolts of lightning that would just obliterate. If you charge them up, they would completely obliterate the target. But if you wanted to do a full charge effect and do massive damage, you had to spend a while charging it up. And you could fire them at a much lesser power, but you really want to charge them up and just do a one-hit kill. You don't want to do you do practically no damage if you didn't charge it up properly. So I'll just go to long distance space travel. So this is the whole purpose I wanted to explain here. So the space modes that's connected to this. So the flying in open space, normally you would have these different points around your ship where you would be bounced off and pushed off, like certain focal points around your ship. There would be like a repulsing force as it's pushing you off a certain distance close to your ship from different points, and it would just repulse and push you off these points, right? And how these kind of points, there was like a convergence of different signals and stuff that would converge to a point that you would bounce off, and it was very weak. Like it when you went into a gravitational well like a planet, as you start getting into like air in an upper atmosphere, and you're getting into gravity, this repulsing force becomes less and less responsive. So as you go into a gravitational well and an atmosphere, it becomes less responsive, and there's kind of like a really unstable-ish downtime between different modes, because where you can barely move at all. And so there's no clear line of when you really want to take over and swap modes. You basically have to free fall for a bit into a planet, and then once you get enough air and gravity, you can use the planetary mode and take over, which is the ship's aerodynamic for that reason. And you would use like a jet kind of technology. It would use air and aerodynamics. So with the aerodynamic stuff, so you would be going down into a planet. You'd be traveling quite fast, faster than you'd realize, and so you need some really strong jet pressure. So to assist this, there's actually 6 turbines. They're quite big, 6 big turbines that will come out of the sides of the ship, 3 on each side, and even from inside the ship, they're loud as fuck, very powerful, and these helped to combat the the falling, you're free falling into the planet. This would help to combat that the how would you call it, the kinetic motion, like you're free falling at such a speed. This would slow you down, and you didn't technically have to use these turbines for landing, but it's best that you did. It's a lot easier to land with them. Let's just say that. But mainly meant for slowing you down, so you didn't travel towards the planet too fast. And they helped you. They were very handy for landing. But if you landed with them, they put up a lot of dust and shit. They're just, like putting a hairdryer in a tin of Milo. Shit just flies everywhere because they're so powerful. And it scares, any people or wildlife would be around, it scare the shit out of them and it'd deafen them. So, there's more I could say on that, but what else could I say? I'll just go straight to the deep space stuff. So you had the space travel mode and you had the planetary mode. It was two different modes that you traveled in the ship. So when you're not traveling in space or on a planet, there's what you might call it like a third mode. Instead of a repulsing force as was happening in space mode, this was actually a pulling force. And this is what a lot of people have asked me about. So this is this is the purpose of me making this video. Just check if I'm still recording. Yeah, it's still recording. So what would happen is, like, basically for the journey, you would go into this stasis chamber and you wouldn't experience what happened in the ship. And you just basically go to sleep and wake up, and you'd be frozen, you'd be wake up. So what happened was, you would turn all this shit on, and what would happen is these 3 points in the ship are on the not right at the front of the ship, but in the front section of the ship, on the top left and right, there were these there's like transmitters that would they were normally protected, and you would uncover them, at least in part, and they would transmit there's one on the front left and right, and there was one at the very front bottom, and they would send a signal out in front of the ship like an intense radioactive wave. You couldn't see this wave, but like it was extremely dangerous. It'd just tear the shit out of atoms and shit like that. You don't want to. This is just really dangerous. And it was only a very short duration signal. It didn't go very far. And what it would do, they would all point in a specific direction in front of the ship. I'd say that it converged at about like 20 to 50% the length of the ship in front of the ship. So it was like it was a safe distance away, but it was in front of the ship. And these 3 points would be aligned to each other, to this central point in front of the ship, and they would create a distortion. It didn't happen right away. It would build up. So you'd have to build up this distortion at a fixed point in front of your ship, and you might call it like a miniature artificial black hole. Now, if you were in deep empty space, dark as fuck, and you created this distortion, you wouldn't see it. But most of the time you did see it, because anything that gets like micrometeorites or anything that even dust, anything that gets trapped in it, it would like kind of glow and light up, and it all distorted mess would happen in and around the distortion all over the place, and then you could start picking up the distortion. So it would start out clean and it would get dirty over time. But I never saw that it would ever get too dirty that it would become a problem. It was just that you just couldn't see in front of you, just this big glowing blur of mess in this distortion would build up if you're going through like dirty area. So what would happen was this distortion would like build up from these transmitters converging on the central point in front of your ship, and it would have some kind of gravitational force. It wasn't strong enough that it had crushed the ship, but it was strong enough that it would pull the ship in toward it. So you're free falling forward into this thing that's in a fixed position in front of your ship. You're falling into something that is being generated in front of your ship. So you're constantly falling forward, building up speed. perpetually. So it's like the carrot in front of the horse. You're riding a horse, you're holding a stick. There's a carrot at the end of the stick. You put it in front of the horse, and the horse runs after the carrot. And it doesn't matter how far the horse runs. The carrot is always going to be at a certain fixed position in front of the horse. It's the same kind of thing. There's a lot I could say on this, and this is why I'm going to have to do another video and go through total details on it. So what happens is these transmitters would send some kind of wave, really dangerous wave that would just obliterate atoms and shit. And it wouldn't be at a fixed wave. It would change. The wave would change in intensity as it went, because it was only a very short range wave. It didn't go very far, and it would all focus on a certain point in front of the ship that would generate this kind of artificial black hole kind of thing. And what would happen after these points converge to that point, when they convert, then they go out. Right? They just keep going. They don't just stop at that point. They just keep going past that point. And when they go past that point, the wave starts inverting in the other direction. And a little bit forward in front of the ship, it would invert into a kind of shield, and then it would just dissipate. So what would happen in front of the ship, in front of this distortion, would be a kind of shield. And any micrometeorite or anything that hits this shield in front of your ship, it'll be completely obliterated. It wouldn't bounce off or anything. You're going 3/4 of the speed of light, and you run into a rock, it's not going to bounce off. But it's not just the kinetic energy. This, as I said, this shit just tears apart atoms and shit. Anything that that bumps into this stuff, it doesn't bounce off. It gets absorbed into it. It gets torn to shreds. So this is why why the distortion gets dirty. The shield absorbs anything that touches it. It absorbs and destroys everything that touches it, and it gets trapped in the distortion. It's like in a big mess, big distorted mess. So what else do I say about it? So yeah, so I said, like the shield would be like kind of like a repulsing force, but the way it worked, it would get, despite being a repulsing force, you're traveling that fast. It ends up getting, the way it works is it ends up getting absorbed into the distortion. So that's how you would travel. How you would travel was, you're constantly falling forward into this distortion, and if you do that for a year, like you're free falling in space, without any resistance, you're just going to go faster and faster and faster and faster. Like, imagine if you're falling into Earth, right? Just say you're standing atop a building, and you jump off a building, and you're falling forwards. Well, let's just take the Earth, compress it into the size of a tennis ball, stick that 10 meters in front of you, and you're falling into this tennis ball, the weight of the Earth. Well, if you have that tennis ball sitting in front of you, and you're in space, and you're constantly falling in front of it, and it's constantly moving away from you as you're falling from it, you're just going to keep building up speed over and over and over. So that's how you build up speed. And you also had to slow down as well during the later stages of the ship too. The ship did this all by itself. You went into stasis, and your ship handled all this. So the faster you go, time flows at a different speed, and you'll build up such speed that time would flow at a very different speed for you and the distortion, which is you're locked into your own timeline together, compared to everything else. So if you go from one planet to another, for example, it might take 1 year on your ship's chronometer, but it might take 50 or 100 years on both of those planets for them. The faster you went, the more time would flow at a different speed. And you could never accurately pinpoint exactly what kind of time you would get there. It would be off. There'd be a bit of like a kind of a random factor. You wouldn't be able to accurately, you get like a general guess, but you wouldn't be able to get the exact time that you'll arrive in their time. That's just how it worked. What else could I say? There's so much I could say about this, and I've got. Look, if you go through all my videos, I'll go through a lot of talks a lot of other videos on this stuff. I go through a lot of details on this stuff. You look into this stuff and you see that you can find fault in anything I say. I've got a history of saying shit before technology is revealed. You know, how do I know this shit? Like, I've said things about space, about the nature of space, things that are in space, and then the whole scientific and astronomy community discovers it years after I'm documented saying it. How could I know these things unless I was there and saw for myself? That's proof that I have been there and I've seen this stuff for myself. So, what else can I say about this? The deep space thing that people have asked me about. The distortion created. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff I missed. I'll just finish up here. I'll do another like detailed video at another time. I just thought I wanted to mention some things about how the long distance space travel worked with this distortion. So you look into what I'm saying. You know, look at my history on this world. I almost failed high school, right? Where am I getting this information from? You can't get this information on the internet. If you want to show me where you can find this shit on the internet, then be my guest. Where am I getting all this from? You know, I can't just take these random guesses and just keep being right over and over again. You know, at what point am I beyond the luckiest bastard in the world, guessing all this shit? And yeah, so I'll just finish here, and I'll just finish with a reminder. Look at my armored light suit, and all you fucking cyber terrorists, I'm coming for your balls.